This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, school success makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, joined by a new friend out of the great state of Ohio, Lisa Riegel, who is a school innovation expert, author, and speaker. And we're going to have some fun today because we're going to talk about the brain. And I love the brain. And hopefully you guys love your brain because we all have one and we're hoping it's working really good. And we're going to learn all about that, your students, your school, and how to make all of those better. But before we jump into all of that fun stuff, we're going to pass it off to her to introduce herself. So, Lisa, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was a teacher for 9 years. I taught language arts, and then I was an administrator for a couple years at a career center. And then I had the fortune to get a fellowship at Ohio State to do my doctoral work. And so my doctoral work was around leadership. It was partly spawned because I had a series of really poor leaders. And I thought, how hard can this be? I need to study this. So I started studying leadership. And I started out really thinking like policies make change, or policies shape change, but people actually make change. And I don't know that principals have a lot of good training. I taught at Ohio State, and most of our stuff was theoretical organizational theory and things like that, but really thinking about how do you engage people. So my doctoral work, my research interest was around, human development and engagement, motivation, hope, theory, all of that kind of stuff. And I've been doing consulting in schools, helping with program redesign and improvements and how to implement strategy for the past 15 years. And about 5 years ago, I had this sort of epiphany that, all of this happens in the brain. Like the brain, change starts in the brain, and we don't know anything about it. And so I started really diving into the neuroscience and understanding what motivates people, what motivates kids. I hear a lot of people today talking about how kids are way different than they used to be, and they are. And there's a lot of reasons for that have shaped their brains differently than how we grew up. And so I created a book called 𝑁𝑒𝑢𝑟𝑜-𝑊𝑒𝑙. First section of the book goes through kind of why are things so different today. The second section goes through the actual brain science of how we form perceptions, how behavior is really the intersection of biology and context. So when we understand behavior, we reframe problems. And when we reframe problems, we have different, more aligned solutions. And then the context piece, we have all kinds of control about how we can build a 𝑁𝑒𝑢𝑟𝑜-𝑊𝑒𝑙 culture and help students and staff be happier, healthier, and more fulfilled. So that's what I've been really digging into. And then I have a new book coming out for leaders that integrates the brain science into how to actually make change stick. And so, some leaders you can get like how to have collaboration or how to build culture, or how to, coach. This kind of brings all those sets of literature together with an understanding of the brain science and how that's impacted. And then it gives principals like step-by-step instructions to building a culture that would be 𝑁𝑒𝑢𝑟𝑜-WELL for their staff.
Man, we got a lot to dive into today. We got our work cut out for us. This is gonna be good. Let's start with a fun, easy question before I jump in asking you and picking your brain a little bit. I ask everybody this same question before we start, and this will be fun because I don't think I've ever been to Ohio before. I don't think. Maybe I drove through it by accident in a corner or something and going through. But if I was to visit you in Columbus, Ohio, what would you say, Mitchell? You need to eat this and do this to experience Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, wow. Well, one thing I would tell you is we have amazing ethnic food in Columbus, Ohio. So I would take you, if you like spicy food, I would take you to my favorite Ethiopian restaurant. So I would definitely say you need to try that. As far as what to do, we have a huge music scene and a huge art scene. And so there's an area called the Short North. There's some theaters that put on really funny, like almost like Saturday Night Live kind of things, and different kinds of shows and music. Like we went to one that was Led Zeppelin, and it talked about like the history of Led Zeppelin. They've done Pink Floyd. And so we have a great arts and music scene. And I would probably take you to some of those fun places.
Okay, man, that sounds good. I don't think I've ever had Ethiopian food. I don't think 'cause that's. I don't even think I've heard. I don't even know what that would be. I guess so.
I know. It is fantastic.
All right,
Yeah.
well, sign me up. All right, sign me up. That sounds good. I don't know. Maybe there'll be a conference in Columbus or something. I'll get up
Yeah.
to, and
Yeah.
then.
I'll definitely take you.
All right, love it. Well, as we jump in, I know you and I talked when we had our first call together, kind of just like why are students different today? So, in your research and the people you've worked with, why are students different, and what is different in the students today?
Yeah. So I think the answer to that question starts with a little bit of brain science. So when we think about our reality, the way that our brain works, there's a piece to it called the thalamus. And the thalamus is kind of like our data manager, and it lives in our limbic system, which doesn't know time and can't tell a story. It's our primitive brain. And so we take in information from the environment and it goes through several filters, sensory filters. So the thalamus says, okay, I'm seeing this, hearing this, touching this, smelling this, whatever. And then it goes into our amygdala, which has our sensory memories. And it says, okay, let me find some associations. This situation, these sensory things remind me of these sensory things from our past. And so that's why like realtors will say, if you're selling your house, burn a candle that smells like cookies, because when we walk in, our brain will associate that smell with like a feeling of home and safety. And so it's,
Yep.
it's making those associations. Those associations become our confirmation biases. So if I think that the world is dangerous and scary and people are mean, then my brain is going to look for places that confirm that. So I'm going to notice the mean guy. I'm not going to notice the nice guy that helped me out. So those filters create our perception of reality. And I think of them almost like a colander or strainer that you'd put noodles in. It has holes. If you take a banana and you jam it through a strainer, it's still a banana, but it doesn't look like a banana on the other side, right? So our reality is the banana. Our perception of reality is the smushed up banana, and it smushes depending on the kinds of filters we have in our brain. So what happens right now is we have a lot of contextual factors that have really changed the way our brain views the world and some of those filters. So for example, when I was growing up, and I'm kind of old. So when I was growing up, I watched Happy Days, and I watched, like Little House on the Prairie when I was a kid, and shows that were like wholesome, about community, about bringing people together, about owning your mistakes and saying you're sorry. And that became my world understanding of how people live. In today's world, we watch The Housewives of whatever depraved city you're watching. We watch Survivor, where it's really about manipulation, othering, kicking people out. It's a completely different worldview of you can't trust people just to be kind. And we're basted in that media. So I'm not saying media is to blame for everything, but it's one factor that has changed those structures in our brain of how we understand the world around us. The second is social media. Social media is a cesspool. And a couple of things that happen in social media that's really scary is that we, like I don't go to the grocery store like hungover on a Saturday and somebody snaps a candid and that becomes my profile picture, right? We filter them. We make ourselves look good. We make ourselves look better than we do. And so we create a persona online that's better than us. And a lot of kids today and adults spend so much time online that they live in this sort of fake world. And I remember I used to be on Facebook. I hate Facebook now. I don't go on it. And it was fun at first because you kind of creep around and see where your friends were from high school and stuff. But then after a while, I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like everybody's on vacation all the time. Like I can't afford to go on vacation all the time. Or everybody's kids are just beautiful and smiling and everybody's happy and fine. And I realized it's this fake sort of sense of reality. Like my kids, I couldn't even get to shower or so I was like, why am I, every time I'm on here, I'm feeling bad about my life and I have a great life. And so kids that spend a lot of time online, they develop this sort of fake personality or fake persona. And then when they have to go into a school, which is brick and mortar, they're already walking into that school feeling less than. And there's a whole bunch of neurological things that happen when we feel that way. The other thing that I see that's really sad is that when we do something kind for someone, we get a little hit of dopamine when they say thank you. And when we're online, we can do something that we don't even have to believe in. We can change our profile picture to a flag of the day or a ribbon or a movement or whatever, and we can get 1,000 likes. Look what a great person you are. You care about, stranded dogs, whatever it is. You get all these likes. Well, from a biochemical perspective, that's like drugs. You get tons and tons of hits. Well, if I'm in a brick and mortar place and I'm with you and you fall down and I help you up, I get one hit. So altruism is reducing. And we see this a lot where people just ignore people or they're not helping people because you don't get the same kind of biologic hit out of it. Um, we also see, and this is something that I feel very strongly about, the medical field wants us sick. I mean, if you watch TV, you would think that everybody in the country has a skin disease or other problems or migraines or diabetes or whatever. So we're inundated with this idea that everybody is sick and that there's medicine that fixes you, that you're the victim of being sick. And when I meet kids, I'm amazed at how many times they introduce me with their disorders. I have ADHD, I have anxiety, I have this, I have that. And the National Institute of Health came out with some statistics that social anxiety is misdiagnosed at 98.7%. So that's disturbing because then now kids, so you think of all those filters, all those colanders in our brain. Now it's the world wants me to be excluded. I am less than when I'm in person. I am sick. I am, so we have all these like damaging filters. And then we don't have family time the way we used to. If you go out to a restaurant, toddlers are on devices just to keep them quiet. And, when I was growing up, we went to dinner and it was boring. You had to listen to your parents. But what I learned, it was, and I wasn't allowed to get up and just leave when it was not about me. I had to learn to be curious, and I vicariously learned experiences about like they had a bad day, how did they deal with it, what did they do? So by accident, you learn all these kinds of stories that help you feel safe and that you're supposed to be in your family where you feel safe. Well, if you and I are, and you see this in restaurants, say you and I are married and we're at a restaurant and we're both on our phones, like we're not connecting, we're not there. And so there's a sense of like, I don't have a belonging. I don't have a collective identity with my family. So there's that. And I go through like 4 or 5 other different major sort of societal shifts that have impacted our brain. The other piece that is the problem is that when you are uncomfortable, when that information goes through those filters, the next thing your data manager or your thalamus does is it sends a message to your amygdala, which is your kind of security monitor in your brain. So it might say, we're in danger, we don't feel good, we're not comfortable. And so then that amygdala hits the panic button and starts our stress regulation system. So we end up getting flooded with stress chemicals. Those shut down our executive functions. So you see a lot of educators I talk to are like, these kids are so different today. They can't do these things. They can't remember stuff. They go home on Friday and don't know what they did on Monday. And those are executive functions. And when we're in a constant hamster wheel of stress, our brain actually doesn't develop those executive functions because essentially your security monitor sends a message and it gets the message from your thalamus or your data manager, and it decides 2 things. It says, are we in trouble? Should I hit the panic button? And it also decides how hard. So it either taps it and gets you kind of alert, like before a job interview or something, you're kind of hyped up. And that's actually a good state to be in. Or it wails on it. And then it sends, and then basically it sends a message immediately up here to your CEO of your brain and says, hey, you need to go get a cup of coffee. We're in danger. Body will handle it. We will take care of it. Which is why, like, fight versus flight, you're not thinking, you're just doing. You're in autopilot to get out of danger. And so we see kids who are living in this hamster wheel of stress, and they've moved into an alarm phase, and it's impacting their ability to think. And then again, some of the social factors, we don't memorize phone numbers anymore. And it's wonderful. I don't have to. The problem is that there is a negative impact that we're not thinking about. And as AI comes in, there's been some research that they're starting to do on cognitive offloading. And it's basically we're offloading our thinking needs to a machine, which is great. I use ChatGPT all the time. I love it. However, we have to recognize that if we use that all the time, it's going to be like the phone numbers in our phone. We don't use the memory anymore to remember those things. So there's a lot of factors that are going on outside of school that are impacting the raw material that's coming in. And my big thing is, if we understand that biology and we understand those delays in executive function, we reframe some of the problems we see, and ultimately we're going to have to fill those gaps. So how are we teaching and providing that repetition and experience over time so that those brain capacities develop?
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. I love this. All right, so let's go back just a little bit to make it really simple for those, like the school leaders that are listening. So we're talking about these students. Like, think about what they do have at home and like what they're bringing into their school. Obviously, like mom and dad maybe fought last night, or coming from a divorced family, or there wasn't enough food that morning. They didn't get a good breakfast, or I don't know if, is there stuff that goes off of this too based on diet? Like the kid had a donut and had some sugary, cereal before the morning, comes in, and then like that is not supporting all their brain and what they need. Is there pieces of that too that come into play?
Yeah. I mean, processed food is terrible for you. And, it's interesting. My daughter has ADHD, and she did a science experiment in middle school where we cut all red dye out of her diet. And here's the real crazy thing. I had to have her ADHD meds compounded because they put red dye in ADHD meds. Like, where is the sense in that? It doesn't make any sense. So you've got kids who have polluted nutrition. You have kids who either, come to school and every single experience we have at home creates a little filter in that thalamus, creates a little filter that changes the way we view reality. So for example, I work with a lot of at-risk schools and at-risk kids. If you have a kid who comes from a home where he's screamed at all the time, the minute you scream at him at school, his brain is associating, okay, now I'm in danger, because maybe at home he gets screamed at and then he gets punched, or he gets left alone or abandoned, or whatever it is. Our brain associates that. And one of the things I say to teachers and leaders all the time, what you are seeing in front of your face has little to do with what's actually happening. It has everything to do with how the brain is making the associations of, like, this is currently like that, and so I'm going to respond in the same way. So when we have this kind of fallacy of like, leave your home life at home, when you're at school, you need to just like shut the door on that. That's not possible from a biologic standpoint.
What's a practical way then for, let's say for just simple numbers, okay, like class has 10 students in it. I know they're typically more than that. Say it has 10 students in it. You have 10 different family backgrounds, 10 different kids coming in with their own problems that are, you don't know about. They're silent, and a teacher is one person. How best to teach and educate then should a student that's coming with all these different things, like I might say something this way, but it's gonna trigger or do something with this student over here. What's the best practical way then to educate the masses if we have all these students that are dealing with different issues?
Right. I'm so glad you asked that, because so many schools think of these issues as tier 2 problems or intervention problems. Where I come at it is, this should just be tier 1 practice, building the culture, building for all. And so the first step is, and this is the NeuroWell culture, is safe, supportive, and proactive. And teachers and leaders have, relationships, they have how they teach, and they have how they celebrate and use positivity to build those things. And so In the book, I talk about, the first step is really establishing a culture of belonging. So if you think about like the Breakfast Club, remember that movie from
Mhm.
100 years ago? So, you had like the nerd and the jock and the weirdo and the burnout and, the typical cliques. And they came together in the library and they created this identity of the Breakfast Club. And through that movie, then they start sharing and opening up and they all belong. Now, they were only in there for a day. So, if they had been in that situation every day, they would form really tight bonds. And so, social researchers call this collective identity. And they started studying it because we have had decades of diversity, right? Diversity training, diversity, how do we multiculturalism, all of these things. And they were looking at the data and saying none of these have worked. We still have people in very like groups. We still have a lot of division between groups. We're not the stock photo where there's like one of every type in there. That's not how people live. And there was actually a book called Why Do All the Black Kids Sit at the Cafeteria Together? And it was kind of getting at this, like that we hunker down with people we know. And what they realized was that the army and the military is different. There's people from wildly different backgrounds, regions, religions, colors, every single thing you can think of. And they form these really strong bonds. And it's this collective identity of like, we're a soldier first. So when I talk about culture in schools, it's like, what does it mean to be a Buckeye? I'm an Ohio State person. Buckeyes do this so well. People who have never been to the school want to be Buckeyes. They wear Buckeye gear. They're all about it because there's this sense that it means something to be part of Buckeye Nation. And if you're wearing a Buckeye shirt and I'm wearing a Buckeye shirt, we're friends.
Yeah.
And so building that collective identity in your classroom. And so I go through a whole series of practices that teachers can do to set that up and set their classroom up as like a learning community where it's not about you and me, like you follow my rules and you comply with what I want you to do. It's more about you're a member of a community. And so what do we do to be a successful community? And it shifts the whole dynamic away from that power struggle, which kids who come from traumatic backgrounds or some of your really high at-risk kids, they don't respond well to a power struggle. And so it shifts that whole thing. So that's like sort of the initial NeuroWell culture. And then there's all kinds of routines that you can put into place to build emotional and intellectual safety that include routines and the way that we teach and assess. And so all of that's kind of detailed in there.
I 100% agree with the when you're talking about the Buckeye thing.
Yeah.
That makes total sense, and that's I like it because it's very tangible because I can understand it. I'm a huge sports guy, and so you
Yeah.
like naturally could be walking down the street and you see somebody and they're like, I'm a Gator fan, which we've been awful for years for football. Basketball, at least we've been okay, but
Yeah.
football, you see somebody like, oh, they're one of me, and it's like
Yes.
doesn't matter where they're from. I don't even know anything about them, but I immediately could go up and have a conversation, be like, man, what do you think about the game? And you just like start talking with
Yes.
somebody because you're a part of this. You're all coming together, that same thing.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So I love that, finding that one thing at the school, whether it's, we're all the Knights and we're all going to be united as the Knights,
Right.
or what is that? Well, I guess give me something else tangible. So I'm thinking about like, I obviously went colors in my head. Is there, what's
Yep.
another go-to that a school could be like, hey, have this be the thing that students are
Yeah.
like united in? What are some of those?
Well, it can be sayings. It can be, just routines and practices. It could be a handshake. I mean, you think about like fraternities and sororities, and we're never too old for this because I always have high school teachers say that's elementary. And I'm like, well, fraternities and sororities are college. Ted Lasso's team hit the believe thing on their way out the door every day. The NFL or any basketball team, they have routines and chants and mantras and practices that they do to celebrate each other and to come together as a team. And so, there's no reason we can't do that in schools. And we have a lot of kids who feel very not at all part of the group. They feel othered or outside of that. And they come in and put their head down, or they come in and they act out so that they can get out of the classroom. I did a huge study with a suburban school here in Columbus, and we were asking the question, what impacts grade point average the most? And we pulled all the data we could find. We pulled like prior teacher, we pulled attendance, we pulled prior grades, do you participate in an extracurricular, like everything we could find, anything they collected. The number one factor that impacted their grade point negatively was nurse visits. If they went to the nurse twice, no impact. If they went a third time, it was by far the largest effect size of any of the other variables that we measured.
Interesting.
And why is that? They want out. They want to go to a place, and usually your nurse is kind of a nurturing person. They want to find a place that is safe. And the second most powerful variable was a 504 plan. Well, who's on those? Special education, not special ed, mental health issues, ADHD issues, but they don't come with any support. They just come with accommodations. And so those two, and so we had some really good discussions about here's your data. Like these kids don't feel emotionally safe, and trauma and stress hurts. It impacts your gut, it impacts your heart, it impacts all, I have I've had a couple spine surgeries. When I'm stressed, my back hurts because it causes inflammation. So it can cause kids to feel sick. And then if we understand that biology, again, we reframe the solution. So if I see a kid who's going to the nurse all the time, I don't sit down with them and say, you need to stop doing that. You're just trying to get out of class. I have a different conversation because I understand this kid, even if it's not that they're physically sick, this kid needs to escape their classroom. Why is that? And how can we make that a safer place for you?
Man, so I love this, and obviously my brain's racking on some different questions. Here's what I think of when you say this part. I love that. Teachers should do that if they're not doing that, but that is a lot of things to think about, focus on. They're already not paid enough. And then we have burnout, which is crazy high in schools across the whole nation. So where do you think that's coming? Like, why are teachers burning out? We got students not paying attention. I mean, is it all coming back to what the students are facing? It's also the teachers facing the exact same thing, just in a different way. And that's what's causing that burnout to happen as well.
Yeah, well, actually, this is a perfect segue. I have written a book called it's Aspirational to Operational. It's a book for leaders, and it reviews an 8C commitment framework, because we haven't, like in my doctoral research looking at leadership, we don't set up a positive culture for teachers. And so how do we make a NeuroWell culture for the teachers where they feel a sense of belonging and appreciation? And the antidote, it is brain science, but it's not like, nuclear science. It's not that hard. Like when you look at what do you do, my short answer, positivity, period. Everything needs to be fill in your bucket, making you feel better, making you feel like you belong. And so when you think about teachers, I was on a project once that I was evaluating an inquiry learning project. And I was so sad because this teacher, I went in and observed, and I was like, man, she is outstanding, like the best example of this I'd ever seen. And I said, hey, can I record you? Because I wanted to include that. And she was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing it right. And I was like, man, is that a leadership failure? Like we need to be looking at, first of all, what do we want people to do? So like the first C in this 8C commitment framework is clarity. How do we, what do we want to see? What do we want to hear? I had a school I was working with, a strategic plan implementation, and I asked them, what's your instructional model? And the superintendent said, we've spent a ton on UDL. We're a Universal Design for Learning UDL school. And I was like, okay, well, what do you see in here when you're like UDLing it out of the ballpark? He couldn't answer that. And so we asked the principals. The principals couldn't answer that. So we went to the teachers, and the teachers were like, oh, is that like pillar thing that we did a couple years ago? I thought the superintendent's head was going to blow off his neck, because he was like, we spent $40,000 on training for this. And I said, yeah, but you bought really expensive posters because you didn't have your leaders engaged in supporting that change and celebrating the little milestones along the way. And I think with teachers too, we give them the desired state, and the desired state may be very, very far away from the current state. So we don't give them stepping stones along the way. So imagine if you were an obese person and I said, you need to lose 150 pounds. That's huge. And it's too big. It's like that zone of proximal development for kids. But if I said, we need to cut your calories in half each day, and here's a menu you can use, and our goal is to lose 2 pounds each week, like that, then it's like, I can do that. So I think a lot of, the leadership plays a huge role in setting up a culture where teachers feel a sense of collective efficacy and hope, and then they translate that into the classroom. So I think the culture starts at the top.
Man, yeah, I agree. So I see that could help with burnout. We talked about a lot. I know you specifically mentioned on our first call about memory, and I think a difference between working memory and just like plain memorization. Like, let's dive into what exactly is that when you're talking about memorization?
Sure. So, working memory is one of the executive functions. So, as we talked about earlier, all the things that are impacting our ability to develop those. Um, Kids don't play, I'm going to grandma's house and I'm taking this, that, and the other. And they don't play those games because they have, devices that they can play on. So, they're not practicing that working memory. Well, working memory is really tied to math. And working memory is like the RAM on your computer. It's not, I can remember something. It's, can I pull something into my brain and hold it there long enough that I can critically think about it, or I can manipulate it, or I can, apply it to something else. And so I was working with an elementary school, and we had a group of second grade teachers who were just like, these kids cannot get the math facts. They cannot do it. We've done it over and over and over. And I said, well, why don't you play memory games with them every day? Because they don't have the architecture to do what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to apply the math concepts onto an architecture that doesn't exist in their brain. So I said, don't do anything else for the next 6 weeks. Play memory games every day in your classroom. And I went back 6 weeks later, and they were like, this is like voodoo. They're like, they have like, their growth is like way more than what it has been along the way. And so, that's a concrete example about how understanding brain science, it's not like one more thing. Like, now we're going to have a brain science initiative. It's about looking at our practices through that lens and saying, if we insert this here, or if we just tweak the way we do this, because when I work with teachers, a lot of times they're like, well, I kind of already do that. And I'm like, you do. Do you want to amplify its impact? Because you're exhausted. And so if I can teach you how to do it more effectively to get a better impact, then you're going to be less tired about it.
Is there kids doing less with memory right now? So when you're talking about, I know we talk about phone numbers and all that, and then they need to memorize these things. So we're doing less memory than we were 10, 20 years ago, and that's having a negative effect on the education of the kids. So should schools be going back to like, hey, you need to make them memorize their phone number, make them memorize these the time. I remember my mom. I memorized the times table. The 2 + 2 is that. All those things. I had to memorize these cards, flashcards. That was a big thing for my mom growing up when I was homeschooled. And I remember that is ingrained in my brain of like, oh man, I know when I look at 12 times 12, it's always going to be 144. Like because I remember the card in my head. But I've also heard people talk negatively of memorization, where they say, well, I don't want students to be to focus just on memorization. I want them to truly know the content themselves. So I don't know if there's a difference in those two, but what are you seeing that schools should do when it comes to helping students with memorization?
So I think that memorization, there's a place for it in education. I mean, we all kind of have to memorize some stuff, like your times tables and things. Like, I'm always alarmed when I go to like a department store and they have a 50% off sale and they have to put the prices on there because people can't half something. So I do think there's a certain level of both. But the way that we make memories stick so that we retain them, as opposed to just memorizing and spitting out the content back to the teacher, is through experience, emotion, and repetition. So our brain is like a highway, and it's got all these on and off ramps. And when we're a baby, it's just a big field of grass. And then through repetition, experience, and emotion, we build these kind of, I call them when then pathways. When I see this, then I do this. So like a baby, when it's first born, learns that if it pulls its lips away from its gums, people go crazy and like give it all kinds of positive information. And they learn over time, when they want attention, they smile, which is why if you see like a 6 or 7 month old, they just walk around smiling at like every stranger because they're like, love me. And, they've learned that. So when we think about content in schools, if there's no positive association, there's no relevance, there's no connection to their own experiences to why they need to know that information, their brain can memorize and it can spit it up for a little while, but it's not going to retain it over time. And that's something that we see a lot, is that kids, and some of the stuff I talk about when I teach like curriculum type stuff is how to sort of cycle back to continue to test for retention, because we have a lot of kids that, they don't score well on their assessments, and then they have a 4.0, but they can't pass an ACT test to get college ready. And that's an example of why. They're doers. They comply, they complete, they fill out the paperwork, they turn it in, but they don't learn it.
Yeah, because we're trying to study for a test. Like, hey, I want you to study all this to take the test, to get the test, and then you're good. Good job. Next test or whatever. And you're like, I don't even know what I just learned.
Right.
Man, I remember again just being even just being homeschooled. I know everybody else has the same problem too. You'd finish in May, and then you like sweet summer vacation, and you come back and be like, I can't remember anything from spring. Like,
Right.
you just took off all those months. I was like, was that worthless? Obviously, you somehow get it back, but I was like, oh man, breaks aren't the greatest for our
Yeah.
education. It's all gone.
Yeah. Right. And that's why like playing memory games with people like what's your favorite ice cream? What's your favorite whatever? They're automatically interested in that. And it's a social thing because now I'm going, oh, Mitchell really likes chocolate. I like chocolate too. I'm making some connections. It's like the shirt, right? You wear Ohio State, I wear it. Now we are friends.
Mhm.
And so you start to build community through these memory games. And then you're also giving kids a chance to remember stuff they care about. I don't care about the capital of Alabama, but I care about whether or not you like chocolate because that is something I like. And maybe if we're friends, we can get a chocolate ice cream. So building the architecture through things that kids care about. And then at that point, once the architecture is built, then the memorization's easier and your brain's ready to do it.
Do you feel like, because I'm thinking about my son as you're talking through this, he's 6 and his memory is incredible. And I don't, is it something we did? I don't know. But I'm like, for the example of him giving, he'll meet somebody, talk to them. He's very much like his father when it comes to this because he likes to talk. And so he'll talk to somebody and he will remember the most random facts about this person. And he'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, they like this. They're from here, whatever it is. He'll remember it. And I'm like, well, that's pretty impressive because you just talked to them for like 20 minutes. It's like going to the playground, go, Dad, I have a new best friend. Here's who he is,
Yeah.
Is that the same thing as like when you're talking about memorization games? It's the same thing. Like if you can talk to somebody and actually remember something about them, is it the same concept, same part of the brain that's functioning with that?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, not knowing your son, is that your son is interested in people. And so that emotion and that experience and that repetition has trained his brain that he remembers people. Now, the question is, he's 6 years old. When he gets to school and he has to memorize a bunch of stuff he doesn't care about, it's harder to remember that. So he has a great, like, social relational memory, but does he have a memory for just factoids, you
Mhm.
know? And it's different. And the thing is, some kids, like I know I see little kids that are like 4 years old, they can tell you every kind of dinosaur that ever lived because they're interested in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of kids don't have that kind of fostering at home of passions. And so when they come to us at school, they may not even know what they're interested in. And they haven't had that practice of being able to build the architecture in their brain. And so it becomes a really big hurdle. It's kind of like telling them leap the wall. And what I'm talking about with these memory games and leveraging that science around, relevance and emotion and experience and repetition, we're giving them the ladder. And then we say jump the wall. And it's like, oh, okay. Still a little bit of work, but it's a lot easier than like pole vaulting into the other side.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show. So what you said earlier reminded me of what my mom told me when I was growing up when it came to, she's like, you can remember all these random football facts, but you can't remember this that I'm trying to get you to memorize. And I was like, yeah, but that's not interesting to me. It's not fun, but
Right.
I can hear one stat of something and it's there for the rest of my life. I remember that guy did this thing.
Yeah.
And, my son is very much, we talk about the dinosaurs. The kid remembers these random animal facts that I absolutely love. But how do you take a kid like that or any of these kids in schools that can remember the most random things, which is great. But hey, I need you to actually memorize this why we do this English word or why we say this way. How do you make a kid interested in something they are not interested in, or how do you get it to stick in their brain if they're not wanting to do that?
Yeah. Well, that's where it becomes really, really important that we are starting our teaching with why do we need to know this? And it is amazing to me as I go into schools, how many times teachers answer to that question is because it's on the test.
Mm.
That's not an answer. And so why do I need to know this? And that's a reasonable question. And so if we're able to tie, and that kind of goes into sort of, you know, asking some questions, giving some turn and talks, giving kids a chance to think about how this information is important to them. And, forever in language arts, it was like text to self connections. It was part of the reading, like read the text, make a connection to yourself, text to others, text to text connections. And it's the same kind of concept when it makes sense to me, or it reminds me of something that happened to me versus being taught completely separate from my life. And that's how I see a lot of teaching going on, is that we're missing opportunities to make those relevant connections, because like your son clearly has the architecture to be able to remember all this stuff. So the question is, if he doesn't want to memorize something or he can't seem to remember it, why?
Mm.
Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense. And we're seeing that a lot. There was an article that came out about some research. Everybody talks about kids are disengaged, and they said they're not disengaged. They just don't see the relevance.
Yeah.
And I think as we look at like AI, that's a huge challenge for schools, because when we started schools, it was basically to teach people how to vote so they could read. Then we said, okay, now it's about being a Renaissance man and getting all this information. But then the internet came out, so it was democratized so everybody could get the information. Then we shifted to its career development and its career pathways. Well, now we have AI that's disrupting those pathways. And so the question is, what's the purpose of school in a post AI world? Because we've got a whole segment of kids that are looking at their teachers like, A, I don't ever need to know this. B, Chat GPT can tell me this way better than you can, and connect it to my life and everything else. And that technology is only going to get better. So just like with the phone, we're going to lose that ability to think if we don't start thinking about how we engage kids in instruction that is relevant to their lives and clearly connected. And it's a challenge because sometimes we don't know, and we don't know what the world's going to look like in 5 years. So how do we do that?
So let's do this then as we look to kind of wrap up the episode. We obviously want to be respectful of your time. Let's talk about some takeaways, like some tangible takeaways, like brain solutions that schools can use for their students and faculty, both at the school and actually at home. Because maybe somebody's listening, they're like, oh, I want to implement some of these in the classroom. But hey, you know what? I got a spouse at home and I got kids at home. Like, what are some things, tangible brain solutions that we can do?
So I think one of the things is that we have to have the body calm. We have to calm the brain down. And I see a lot of teachers will do movement breaks or breaks. One of the things that I talk about is learning sprints. And what I see in classrooms is teachers wait, they're reactive instead of proactive. And like a NeuroWell culture is safe, supportive, and proactive. So I see them wait until the kids are super squirrely, and then they're like, okay, we need a movement break. Or, the kids in a high school are talk, and finally the teacher's like, okay, fine, take 5 minutes and do this. If we're proactive, then we understand the attention span of a human when they're young, when they're kids, is their age plus 2 minutes. If they have executive function delays or if they have ADHD, it's their age minus 2 minutes. So if you're teaching a 9-year-old, you got 7 minutes. If they have ADHD, you got 11 if they don't. So if we break and chunk our lessons and we insert some of these chances for positivity. So I have a positivity jar. So we do a learning sprint. We give the expectations. We're all going to focus during this learning sprint. Then we have a positivity jar, and we just pull one out. We say, hey, turn to your neighbor and pay him a compliment. Or, talk at your table about one thing you're really proud of. Or what's one thing nobody would know about you that you think makes you pretty special? Or what's one nice thing that happened today? And so just priming that thalamus to be positive. And if we create a classroom culture where positivity is the norm, you're going to see way more learning and engagement going on.
That's good. I love that. Well, let's do this. I always ask everybody the same question before we close out. All of this has been obviously great, and it's all been good advice. But I always ask do you have one final piece of advice that you'd like to share with all the school leaders that are listening?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that brain science is the foundation. I mean, real change, whether you're trying to lead change or you're trying to coach a teacher or you're dealing with discipline with a kid, the change starts in the brain. So it's understanding that biology and then creating a context that is safe, supportive, and proactive. And it's not that hard to do. It's about taking the things that we are already doing, wearing ourselves out trying to do. And when we all of a sudden shine the brain science on it, we go, oh, well, that's why it's not working. Maybe if we tweak it here. So it's not about throwing everything out. It's about iterating what you do to align better with how our brain works. And just as a side note too, the other thing they can do, just to be shameless, is they can call me and I can help. So I do, I do book studies with folks if they have a group of teachers that want to do a book study and they can earn CEUs. I do keynotes, I do leadership coaching, and I take usually about 5 or 6 clients that I go really deep dive and help them do transformative work. And that's the really exciting stuff. So I welcome anybody, if they want more information, to reach out.
And how can they do that? Is it website, email, and how they find your books? What's the best way to do that?
Yep. So the books are on Amazon. It's called NeuroWell. So if you just type in NeuroWell in my name, or you can go to lisariegel.com, and then you can click on the book right from the website and it'll take you to the link to Amazon. And then at the end of this month, my 8C framework book that is the sort of leadership aspirational to operational will be up there too, and they can link directly from the website.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, you've been working hard on all this. You've been doing this a long time. I just want to say thank you, obviously, for your time for today to pour into our listeners, but also thank you for all the years you've poured into education and those that are in education. I really appreciate it, and I'm hoping you're able to serve and help more and more across the U.S. and abroad. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. It was nice. It was fun having a conversation about this.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Lisa for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love everything that comes into play with the brain and learning how, obviously, that affects everybody in the world, but obviously specifically about schools and students and all that. So I'm hoping, as always, guys, you were able to take at least one thing away from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. There was definitely more than one inside this episode, so I'm hoping you're able to take even more than one and help it be a better place for your students and help them be able to have a better environment to learn and to grow. And so if you need to, as always, go back, listen to the episode 1.5 speed if you need to. That's my favorite thing to do when I listen to podcasts, but I do know I can talk kind of fast. So sorry if that's too fast at 1.5 speed. But hey, before you guys go, I do want you to know about our 3 free resources available here at School Success. And easy peasy, guys. You're doing the first one right now. It's the podcast. We're dropping weekly episodes every Monday morning of the School Success podcast, and we want to make sure you're not missing out on those. So subscribe. It's completely free, and then you won't miss any of these episodes that we come out with. We spend a lot of time getting these prepped, prepared, recorded, and out to you guys. So subscribe would be awesome. And if you really love the content, a 5-star review, man, that'd be like the icing on top or the cherry on top, however you want to say it. So thank you for that in advance. The second free resource is on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. Top right-hand corner is a button, the School Success Report. We send that out directly to your inbox every single week. Different articles the team has either written or found online to help you, the school leader, be more successful. And we want to make sure you're not missing out on that as well. Last but not least is our free private Facebook community called School Success Makers. I'm personally in there. Would love to see you in there as well. It's where you can have community, build community, ask questions, and learn from others in the school space. So we want to make sure you're not missing out on that as well. And I think that's all I got for you guys. So we will be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.